You paid for his groceries out of your own pocket, for someone you didn't even know, that's what they asked her. But Anna Reynolds didn't hesitate, an old veteran short on cash. What would her small act of kindness lead to? She didn't see a uniform, she saw a human being. What she didn't know is that simple kindness would echo louder than she ever imagined. Months later, strangers arrived at her door, not to pay her back, but to give her something far greater, something she never expected. What could possibly repay such a small debt? Because sometimes the smallest debt becomes the greatest legacy. Welcome to Graceful Valor Stories, where tales of compassion and kindness are told. Let's uncover what really happened. Brooksville, Missouri didn't move fast. It was the kind of town where days spilled into each other like molasses, where folks still held doors open, nodded from across the street, and remembered your coffee order without asking. For Anna Reynolds, 27 years old, and standing behind Register 2 at the Brooksville General Market, it was just another slow Tuesday night. The fluorescent lights buzzed faintly above her, casting a pale glow over aisles lined with canned soup, dented cereal boxes, and end-of-season clearance signs. Outside, the rain drummed a steady rhythm against the glass doors, pulling in lazy puddles across the parking lot. Anna didn't mind the quiet, in fact, she preferred it. Life had been loud enough lately. The rent was due in 6 days, the number in her checking account said otherwise. Her mother's prescriptions, $200 a month, even after insurance, sat like an anchor on every paycheck, and yet, she was here, still standing, still scanning, one item at a time. The bell above the door jingled softly. She looked up. A man stepped inside, older, maybe 65, though the years had carved their map across his face deeper than most. His army green jacket hung off narrow shoulders, sleeves frayed at the cuffs, the patches were faded, the kind you didn't see much anymore. His boots, scuffed, waterlogged, moved carefully across the slick tile. William Carter. Anna didn't know his name yet, but she recognized the weight in his gait. It was the walk of someone who carried more than groceries. He moved slow, deliberate. Collected a loaf of bread, a carton of eggs, a half-gallon of milk, cans of soup, the cheap kind, a box of instant oatmeal. His hands lingered at the display of ground beef, before retreating empty. When he reached her register, the man set his basket down with a quiet breath. No umbrella, his silver hair clung damp to his temples, raindrops slid from his jacket, pooling at his feet. Evening, he said, voice rough but polite. Good evening, sir, Anna replied, offering a small smile. Staying dry out there? He gave a faint chuckle, trying item by item. She scanned his things. The beep of the scanner echoed too loudly in the empty store. Bread, eggs, milk, soup, oatmeal, the total $32.87. The man reached into his pocket, pulling out a worn leather wallet. His fingers, calloused and slow, unfolded a few crumpled bills, a 10, another 5, a few singles. He paused, counted again. His thumb lingered over a folded 20, then stopped. Anna saw it before he did. He was short, about $15 short. It happened more often than folks like to admit. She watched his jaw tighten, not in embarrassment, not quite, more like a man recalculating what he could leave behind. Behind him, a couple lingered by the impulse racks, pretending to browse, but not really. The whispers started soft, didn't check before coming up here. Shame, probably happens a lot. Anna's grip on the scanner tightened. The man straightened, sliding the bread and eggs back toward him. I'll just take these, he said quietly. His dignity was intact, barely, but intact. Anna didn't hesitate. Before he could move, she reached into her apron pocket, swiped her card, and with a soft beep, covered the difference. The receipt printed before he could protest. His head snapped up. Miss, he started, to voice gruff with something more than age. That's not necessary, she smiled, not wide, not loud, just enough. No one should have to choose between dinner and dignity, she said simply, folding the receipt and placing it gently in his bag. The silence around them changed. No one whispered now. William Carter looked at her for a long moment. No grand speech, no dramatic thank you. He just nodded, a small, deliberate gesture, one soldier to another. Even if she'd never worn a uniform, he collected his groceries, pulled his collar against the rain, and left. Anna exhaled softly. To her, it was nothing. $15. She'd figure it out later, maybe skip lunch tomorrow. To him, well, maybe it was just groceries, or maybe it was more, but Anna didn't expect to find out. As the bell jingled behind him, life settled back into its familiar rhythm. The scanner beeped, the lights hummed. Another Tuesday night, another bag filled. She didn't know his name, she figured she never would, but somewhere a small debt had been quietly paid, and to Anna Reynolds, that was enough, or so she thought. Outside, under the soft orange glow of the street lamp, William Carter moved slower than usual. The rain didn't bother him much, he'd known worse, but what lingered wasn't the cold, it was her words, dinner and dignity. He reached into his jacket, pulling out an old flip phone, the kind with buttons you had to press hard. His hands weren't as quick as they used to be, but this message didn't need speed, just truth. He thumbed out the text, carefully reading it twice before hitting send. Today, a stranger Covered my groceries, maybe it's time we return the favor. Her name's Anna Reynolds. The message landed in the inbox of Homes for Heroes, the nonprofit he'd served with for the past 15 years. William Carter wasn't just a retired sergeant, he was a founding member, and while they'd built homes for fellow veterans time and again, tonight felt different, because tonight dignity had come full circle, and it was time someone else got to feel that weight lifted. The rain had stopped by morning, but for Anna Reynolds, the storm was far from over. Brooksville woke up slow, same as always. The diner opened at 6 o'clock, the post office bell chimed on the hour, and the streets gleamed under a soft gray sky. For most, it was just another Wednesday. For Anna, it was another day doing math with numbers that never added up. Rent was still due, the ceiling in her apartment still leaked, the old space heater still rattled like it was coughing up its last breath, and her mother's prescriptions, 3 refills this week alone, still waited quietly, demanding the money Anna didn't have, but none of that showed when she tied on her apron, stepped behind register 2, and smiled at Mrs. Henderson as she fumbled for coupons. Kindness wasn't conditional, at least that's what Anna believed. When old Mr. Calloway dropped his bag of oranges in the parking lot, she was the one kneeling to gather them up. When the Martinez kids came in barefoot tracking dirt through aisle 5, she was the one who slipped them a lollipop at checkout. No questions asked. These weren't grand gestures, they weren't social media posts or viral moments, they were small, quiet things, the kind of things you did because it was right, because someone had to, and for Anna, that was enough, or so she thought. 70 miles away, in a brick community hall outside of Jefferson City, the mood was different. The Homes for Heroes quarterly meeting wasn't a glamorous affair. Rows of folding chairs, a coffee urn that had seen better decades, the flag hanging crooked behind the podium, but no one here cared much about decor, they cared about service, and at the heart of it sat William Carter. He wasn't a man for speeches. 20 years in uniform had taught him the value of quiet action over loud words, but tonight, as the murmurs died down and all eyes turned to him, William cleared his throat. "I want to tell you about a cashier," he began, a voice low, steady. The room stilled. "She's young, works nights at a grocery store in Brooksville, nothing fancy, just a kid trying to get by." He paused, thumb brushing absently over the brim of his weathered cap. "Last week, in the rain, she covered $15. I didn't ask who I was, didn't know about the patches on my jacket. She didn't see a veteran, she just saw a human being." The words hung there, heavier than the silence that followed. These men and women knew what it meant to be invisible, to have service become footnotes, to have sacrifice turn into small talk. But Anna, this girl with no stripes, no ribbons, had seen past all that. She said something that stuck. William continued, "No one should have to choose between dinner and dignity." A murmur rippled through the crowd. It wasn't the grandness of the gesture that moved them, it was the simplicity. And in that simplicity, they recognized something sacred. Homes for Heroes had built houses for soldiers, for families left behind, for comrades who came home to nothing, but rarely had they considered those outside their ranks, the quiet civilians who stood guard in different ways. William set down his cap. "I think it's time we build one for her." A beat, then a nod, another, a murmur of agreement swelling into conviction. The decision was made, unanimous, and far beyond what Anna Reynolds could have ever imagined. Back in Brooksville, Anna folded her apron, tucked it into her locker, and trudged home beneath a sky heavy with unshed rain. The walk was long, her apartment was small, but it was home, for now. That evening, while reheating yesterday's soup, her phone buzzed. An email, subject line, "Invitation to Community Honor Day," from Homes for Heroes. Her brows furrowed as she read. They were hosting an event in Brooksville, honoring veterans and those who stand with quiet dignity beside them. She blinked. She's invited. It didn't seem right. She wasn't a veteran, she wasn't anyone, must be a general invite, she thought, some community mailing list she'd somehow landed on. Still, it was kind of them to reach out. She clicked RSVP, thinking it might be nice to show up, sit quietly in the back, and listen. Support is support after all. Anna had no idea the night was never going to be about sitting quietly. 2 days later, in a conference room lined with blueprints and impact reports, the Homes for Heroes leadership gathered again. Funding secured, someone confirmed, tapping a spreadsheet, local contractor on board, added another, media team notified, said a third. At the head of the table, William Carter nodded slowly. He wasn't one for fanfare, but this was worth doing right. He looked down at the folder in front of him. Reynolds, Anna, age 27, Brooksville General Market, no medals, no headlines, just a record of quiet, stubborn kindness. "She gave me back something that night," William said quietly, "and she didn't even know it." The room understood. By the time the meeting adjourned, the plan was set. Come Community Honor Day, Anna Reynolds was going to learn what happened when kindness rippled wider than she ever imagined. That weekend, Brooksville bustled in a way it rarely did. Banners unfurled across Main Street, folding chairs lined the park green, the town's small brass band tuned up beneath a creaking gazebo. Local families drifted in and drawn by flyers and word of mouth. Anna arrived quietly, faded jeans, a cardigan with frayed cuffs. She sat 3 rows from the back, hands folded in her lap, perfectly content to be invisible. This wasn't her day, or so she thought. As the crowd settled, the MC stepped up to the microphone. "Tonight, we gather to honor service, sacrifice, And sometimes the quiet acts of kindness that remind us what we're fighting for. Anna smiled softly, words like that were nice to hear, reassuring, but they weren't meant for her until the next name was spoken. And tonight, we'd like to recognize someone from our own town, someone who didn't ask for thanks, who didn't know she was being watched, but whose simple choice in a grocery aisle reminded a soldier what dignity feels like. Anna's breath caught. No, it couldn't be, but then he stepped forward. William Carter, same green jacket, same slow, steady stride. He approached the podium, gaze sweeping the crowd, and then it landed on her. She didn't see a veteran, she just saw a human being, he said, voice echoing in the stillness. Anna's heart pounded, her hands curled into fists. No, this wasn't, but it was Anna Reynolds. Would you join me up here, please? The world tilted, faces turned, applause rose like a wave. Anna's legs refused to move, but somewhere beneath the shock, a quiet truth bloomed. This was happening, and there was no hiding from it. Anna Reynolds had never stood on a stage before, not like this. The walk from her seat to the podium felt impossibly long, each step echoed louder than the last, her pulse roaring in her ears. She could feel every eye in the crowd, neighbors, customers, strangers, following her, though not with the sharp, curious stares of gossip. This was different, this was respect. She didn't understand why. William Carter stood waiting, his presence as steady as ever. When she reached him, he gave her a quiet nod, not grand, not dramatic, just a shared understanding. Two people bound by a moment in a grocery store aisle, up close. His voice was softer than the microphone had let on. You're braver than most, Miss Reynolds, he said, offering his hand. Anna shook it, her fingers trembling. She wasn't brave, she wasn't anyone, but right now, none of that seemed to matter. William turned back to the crowd, raising his hand for silence, not that anyone had dared to make a sound. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, voice clear, rich with meaning, tonight, we gather to honor service, to remember those who stood for something bigger than themselves. A ripple of nods passed through the audience, but service, he continued, isn't always measured in tours or medals. Sometimes it's in the quietest acts, the ones no one sees, or so they think. He gestured toward Anna. Last month, this young woman paid $15 for my groceries. She didn't ask who I was, didn't care about the patches on my jacket. She saw a man who was struggling, and she acted. Hush fell. She didn't see a veteran, she saw a human being. Anna swallowed hard. She wanted to shrink into the floor, to disappear behind the safety of her register, her quiet routines. But here, beneath the lights, with William's words hanging in the air, there was nowhere to hide. William's voice softened, but somehow carried even further. In our line of work, we build houses for heroes, but sometimes it's the heroes in plain clothes we overlook. Tonight, we change that. He nodded once. From stage left, a man approached, middle-aged, crisp suit, military posture unmistakable. He carried a small polished wooden box. Anna's breath hitched. William took the box, opened it carefully, and held up a gleaming key. Not just any key, a house key affixed to a plaque engraved with her name, Anna Reynolds. William said, on behalf of Homes for Heroes, it's our honor to present you with the key to your new home. The words barely registered, new home. There was a beat of stunned silence, then the crowd erupted. Applause thundered through the open-air pavilion, a rising wave that seemed to shake the ground beneath her feet. People stood, neighbors she'd rung up at the register, teachers from her high school days, faces she knew only in passing, all standing, all clapping. In the front row, her mother wept openly, dabbing at her eyes with a trembling hand. Anna couldn't move. William turned to her, pressing the key into her hand. This isn't charity, he said quietly, voice just for her, it's gratitude for seeing what others missed. The metal felt impossibly heavy. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came. Instead, she looked out at the crowd, at her mother's tear-streaked face, at the people of Brooksville, the small town where kindness often went unnoticed, and now it had come full circle. William guided her gently to the microphone. Anna had never spoken to more than 3 people at once. Now hundreds of eyes watched her with quiet expectation. She cleared her throat, barely trusting her own voice. I don't know what to say. A ripple of soft laughter moved through the crowd, encouraging, warm. I didn't do anything special, she said, clutching the key as if it were the only thing keeping her grounded. I was just doing what anyone should do. She paused, glancing at William. But maybe that's the point. Maybe the things we think don't matter actually do. The applause returned, softer this time, but somehow louder in its meaning. Anna stepped back, breath shaking, heart thundering. She hadn't realized how much she'd needed to be seen, not as a hero, not as a savior, just as someone trying to do the right thing. Tonight, that was enough. William leaned in once more. You didn't owe me anything, he said, voice low, but heavy with feeling, but now we owe you this. His words struck deeper than any applause, because Anna understood finally what he meant. This wasn't about a free house, it wasn't about $15, it was about the unseen debts we carry, the quiet moments that ripple outward, far beyond what we expect. Tonight, kindness had come home, literally. As the event wound down, people approached her in small groups, some offered hugs, others simply touched her shoulder, nodding in that way small-town folk did when words weren't enough. Her mother stood beside her now, hands trembling, eyes shining. You did good, Anna, she whispered. You did real good. Anna smiled through the lump in her throat. For the first time in a long time, she felt steady. William rejoined her as the crowd began to thin. There's a crew breaking ground next week, he said, matter of fact as ever. You'll have walls, a roof, heat that doesn't rattle, all because you looked at an old man and saw something worth helping. Anna's breath hitched. I don't deserve this, she said, shaking her head. William gave a small, knowing smile. That's exactly why you do. The sun had dipped low, casting long amber streaks across the park. The flag overhead fluttered softly in the breeze. Somewhere, someone played a lone acoustic guitar, soft, familiar chords that wrapped around the evening like a memory. Anna looked at the key in her hand. A house, her house, built not from luck, not from charity, but from a moment of simple human decency. It felt surreal, overwhelming, and yet right, because in the end, dignity was never about grand gestures, it was about the small things, a bag of groceries, a quiet kindness, a choice, and tonight, the choice had come back to her in ways she'd never imagined. As the crowd dwindled, William offered his arm. Come on, Miss Reynolds, let me walk you home, at least until we build you a better one. Anna laughed, a sound freer than it had been in months. She took his arm, and together, they stepped off the stage, into a town that had just remembered what kindness could build. The house stood modestly on the edge of Brooksville, a one-story craftsman, white siding, soft blue shutters, and a wide front porch with rocking chairs that caught the morning light. It wasn't grand, it wasn't flashy, but to Anna Reynolds, it was everything. She stood on that porch now, coffee in hand, watching the town wake up. Early sunlight filtered through the sycamore trees, dappling the new wooden steps, where a small bronze plaque had been placed just days ago. This home was built on a $15 act of kindness. Simple words, but they carried more weight than she'd ever imagined. The house wasn't just a place to sleep, it wasn't just four walls and a roof, it had become something else, a symbol, a reminder that even in a world moving too fast, even when no one's watching, small kindnesses still mattered. Brooksville had taken notice. It started small. Mrs. Henderson from the pharmacy began rounding up spare change for customers who came up short. At the post office, Mr. Tucker, never known for his patience, had been seen helping an elderly neighbor fill out her forms. Even the general market, where Anna still worked 2 shifts a week, had changed. There was a new sign above register 2 now. It read, no one should have to choose between dinner and dignity. And it wasn't just a slogan. The store quietly started a pay-it-forward fund, small donations from customers, matched by the owner, that covered groceries when wallets came up light. Anna never asked for that, but seeing it happen, it filled her with a quiet pride. The media had caught wind, of course, first the local paper, then a regional news crew. Eventually, the segment aired on a national morning show. For a while, her name was everywhere. Local cashier, small act sparks big change. But fame wasn't what stuck. What mattered was seeing kindness ripple out, neighbor to neighbor, stranger to stranger. It wasn't about her. It never had been. On a crisp Saturday morning, William Carter stopped by. He didn't knock. He didn't have to. Anna spotted him from the porch, walking that familiar steady gait up the gravel drive, a paper bag in one hand, a knot already forming. Brought you something, he said, holding out the bag. Inside, 2 loaves of fresh sourdough, still warm, Mrs. Mallister's recipe. He added, taught me after the war. Figured it was time to pass it on. Anna smiled, touched by the gesture. You didn't have to. You know, he gave a soft chuckle. That's the point. They sat on the porch, watching the town breathe. For a while, they said nothing, and then William spoke, voice thoughtful. You realize you've done more than build a house, don't you? Anna shook her head. I didn't build anything, William. You and Homes for Heroes did that. He tilted his head, eyes kind but firm. You gave us a reason. People don't rally behind walls and beams, they rally behind reminders of who they want to be. Anna looked down at her hands, rough from work, stained from life. I'm not special, exactly, William said, and that's what makes it powerful. The words settled over her, warm and weighty, because maybe, just maybe, being ordinary was exactly what the world needed. More of ordinary people choosing to be kind when it wasn't convenient, when no one was watching, when it cost something. Weeks turned to months. The house became a gathering place, not by design, not by announcement, it just happened. People stopped by, some to drop off baked goods, others with stories, quiet confessions of times they'd been helped, or wished they had. Anna listened. Sometimes that was all someone needed. One evening, a young woman knocked, a mother of 2, embarrassed, explaining that she'd lost her job and wasn't sure how to get back on her feet. Anna invited her in, made tea, and shared her own story. By the time the woman left, she wasn't fixed, but she wasn't alone, and sometimes, that was enough to start. The biggest surprise came from the general market. One afternoon, Mr. Davies, the owner, a man more known for balancing ledgers than warm gestures, pulled Anna aside. We're starting a community initiative, he said, groceries for good. Thought maybe you'd head it up, organize the Pay It Forward fund, make it official. Anna blinked. Me? Davies shrugged, awkward but sincere. You're already doing it, Reynolds, might as well give it a name. She laughed, then, a real, surprised laugh. Who would have thought? A $15 gesture, a bag of groceries, a ripple that just kept moving. On the first anniversary of her new home, a small ceremony was held. Nothing big, just friends, neighbors, a few members from Homes for Heroes. William was there, of course, standing quietly by the plaque. When it came time to speak, Anna kept it simple. I'm not a hero, she said voice carrying through the still afternoon. I'm not brave, I didn't do anything more than what I hope any of you would have done. She paused, looking out at the faces gathered there. But maybe that's exactly why we need to remember it, because it's the small choices, the quiet ones, that build the kind of world we want to live in. There was no roaring applause, just a soft, collective nodding, understanding, agreement. When the ceremony ended, Anna lingered on the porch, tracing her fingers over the bronze plaque. This home was built on a $15 act of kindness. Simple words, but true. In the end, it wasn't about the house, it was about what the house stood for. A reminder that even when life feels overwhelming, even when your name isn't in lights, even when no one notices the small good you do, it matters, it always matters. That evening, as the sun dipped low, Anna sat by the window with a warm cup of coffee, watching the town breathe. Brooksville hadn't changed overnight, but it was changing, one quiet act at a time. She thought back to that night in the grocery store, the rain, the man with the worn jacket, the weight of $15. Funny how something so small could echo so far. And as the stars blinked awake above the quiet streets, Anna smiled, not because she'd been given a home, but because she'd learned this truth: kindness doesn't keep score, but sometimes the world does, and when it does, it builds something worth living in, one act at a time. In our darkest moments, kindness still finds a way, often in the quietest places. Not everyone who helps wants recognition, some just need to know that today someone isn't going hungry, and sometimes that alone is enough to change a life. You may forget the story, but if no one retells it, history stays silent forever. Subscribe to Graceful Valor Stories, where justice is honored, kindness is remembered, and no act of quiet heroism is ever lost.